The phone rang sharply, cutting through the stillness of the afternoon. I glanced at the caller ID. It was my husband, James. "Amy," he said in a casual tone, as if this was just a normal conversation. "You need to come to Isa Restaurant right away. You know, the one across from the station. The whole family's here waiting for you." I was confused. "Isa Restaurant? You mean that fancy French place? What do you mean the whole family is waiting for me?" Without waiting for me to understand what was going on, James interrupted. "Yeah, I reserved the entire place. I even invited some of the family members who usually can't make it. It's going to be great." There was a pause. Then he added, "The cost is around $20,000, and I'll be paying with your credit card." Before I could respond, the line went dead. I stood there in silence, gripping the phone. Did he just say my credit card? $20,000? Was this a joke? But deep down, I knew it wasn't. James had pulled reckless stunts before. But this? This was different. Despite the shock, I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. I wasn't about to let him get away with this, whatever this was. 20 minutes later, I arrived at Isa Restaurant, my mind racing with questions. How could James be so careless? What was his plan? Did he really think I'd let him spend $20,000 without a second thought? As I walked into the restaurant, I spotted James standing by the entrance. He was alone, with that smug, unsettling smile on his face, like he had everything under control. But I could see the cracks in his composure. "Amy," he said, spreading his arms wide as if greeting an old friend. "The relatives are in the other room. We're just getting started." I stared at him, still trying to process everything. "James, you can't seriously be planning to pay $20,000 with my credit card." His grin widened. "Of course I am. Like I said, it's only natural for a wife to support her husband. Don't you agree?" I couldn't believe my ears. Was this the man I had married? The man standing before me seemed more like a stranger, someone so consumed by arrogance that he couldn't see the mess he was creating for himself. "James," I said, trying to remain calm, "this is ridiculous. You don't even have a plan, do you? You don't understand what you're doing." But James wasn't listening. He looked at me like I was the one who didn't understand. "Amy, don't worry about the details. I've got everything covered." He leaned in closer and lowered his voice. "A wife's money belongs to her husband, remember?" My patience snapped. "You really don't get it, do you? This isn't about money. It's about respect, and you're crossing a line." James shrugged, unfazed by my words. "You can argue all you want, but in the end, I'm paying with your card. If you have a problem with that, maybe you should stop being my wife." There it was, the threat. It wasn't the first time he had used divorce as leverage to control me, but today, I wasn't going to back down. I pulled out a folded piece of paper from my purse and held it in front of him. "What's this?" James asked, his eyes narrowing. "I canceled the credit card a month ago," I said, my voice steady. "Here's the cancellation certificate." For the first time, James looked unsure of himself. He grabbed the paper from my hand and scanned it quickly, his face turning pale. "No way," he muttered under his breath. "You're lying. This has to be fake." "Why would I lie?" I shot back. "I knew you'd try something like this, so I prepared for it. That card is useless now, James. So, tell me, how are you going to pay for this dinner without any money?" James clenched his jaw, his eyes darting around the restaurant as if searching for a way out. "I took the card from your purse this morning," he said through gritted teeth. "If it was really canceled, why would you still carry it around?" I let out a short, bitter laugh. "I left it there on purpose, James. I knew you'd try to steal it. And guess what? You fell for it." His expression darkened. For a moment, he stood there in stunned silence, but then his anger flared up. "Amy, you're really starting to test my patience," he hissed, his voice rising. "A wife doesn't talk to her husband like this." His voice was so loud that heads turned in our direction. The other diners began to whisper, casting curious glances our way. I could feel the tension building around us, but James didn't seem to care. His ego was too fragile, his pride too easily wounded. Just as I was about to say something, I saw my in-laws approaching. They had clearly heard James raising his voice and had come over to check what was going on. "James," his father said, frowning, "what's the meaning of this? You're disturbing everyone in the restaurant." James forced a smile, trying to act like everything was fine. "It's nothing serious, Dad. We just got a little carried away, that's all." But his father wasn't convinced. "What's going on?" he repeated. Зрение между двумя нами. I took a deep breath and decided it was time to reveal the truth. "James booked this expensive restaurant without telling me," I explained. "He was planning to pay the $20,000 bill using my credit card." My in-laws looked shocked. $20,000? James's mother gasped. "Is this true, James?" James tried to laugh it off, but I wasn't done yet. He took the card from my purse, but what he doesn't realize is that I canceled it a month ago. He has no way to pay. There was a brief, stunned silence as the gravity of the situation sank in. James's parents exchanged worried glances, and I could see the confusion and disbelief on their faces. James, now desperate, tried to regain control. "Amy's mistaken," he said, his voice dripping with false confidence. "I'll settle the bill. Don't worry." With that, he turned and walked toward the cashier, throwing me one last defiant smile as if he still believed he could salvage the situation. But I knew better. I watched as he spoke with the cashier, his smile slowly fading. When he returned to the table, he looked tense. "Dad, Mom," he began, his voice barely a whisper, I can't make the payment. Amy's card was really canceled." His parents were horrified. "You were planning to use Amy's card to pay for all of this?" his father demanded. "And you didn't even ask her?" James stammered, searching for an excuse, but there was nothing left to say. The truth was out, and now there was no hiding from the consequences. "I'll explain everything," I said, turning to my in-laws. "This isn't just about today. James has been using my credit card without permission for months. He's been spending money on things I never agreed to." James's father was visibly angry now. "You've been doing this behind her back? How could you, James?" James opened his mouth to defend himself, but I wasn't finished. I pulled out another document from my bag, a credit card statement. "And it gets worse," I said, holding it up for everyone to see. "James has been buying luxury gifts for another woman with my card." The color drained from James's face as he reached for the document, but I held it just out of his grasp. "Who is she, James?" I asked, my voice cold and steady. "Who is the woman you've been buying all these expensive gifts for?" James swallowed hard, his eyes darting around the room as if he was looking for an escape. "It's not what you think," he muttered, barely able to meet my gaze. "She's just a friend. Those were birthday presents." I raised an eyebrow, unimpressed by his weak explanation. "Birthday presents? For who exactly? Your friend or your mistress?" The room fell silent as the weight of my words sank in. James's parents looked stunned, and the other diners had fallen silent, their attention fully on us now. James's voice trembled as he tried to respond. "It's not like that," he said, his voice cracking. "You're making this into something it's not, Amy. I was just—" "Enough," I interrupted. "I'm done with your lies, James. I know the truth. I've been watching you for months." James's face twisted with anger and fear. "You've been spying on me?" I nodded. "I had to. You were barely home, always making excuses to leave, missing important events, using my credit card behind my back. You left me no choice." James's parents were staring at him now, their expressions filled with disappointment. His mother spoke first. "James," she said quietly, "is this true? Have you been treating Amy like this?" James stood frozen, unable to answer. His father's face hardened as the realization hit him. "I trusted you, James," he said, his voice filled with anger. "We all did, and this is how you repay us?" James tried to defend himself, but it was clear that the more he spoke, the deeper he dug himself into a hole. He was unraveling before our eyes. I just needed a little help," he stammered, his confidence crumbling. "I thought it was fine. I'm your husband, Amy. I'm supposed to be able to use our money." "Our money?" I repeated. "You mean my money." and you used it to spoil someone else. My father-in-law's expression darkened. James, he said sternly, you've crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. The look in James's eyes changed. He knew he was losing control, and in a desperate attempt to save face, he turned to me with an accusation. You've been trying to trap me this whole time, haven't you? Setting me up to fail. I shook my head slowly. No, James, you trapped yourself. This is all you're doing. For a moment, James was silent. Then, in one last act of defiance, he said the words that shocked everyone in the room. It doesn't matter what you say. I'm leaving. I'll be with Lily. His parents gasped. The relatives were horrified. I stood there, letting the words settle, before I delivered the final blow. Lily, I said quietly. You mean the woman who's been seeing other men behind your back? James blinked in confusion. What are you talking about? Lily loves me. I smiled sadly. No, James. She doesn't. She was using you, just like you used me. I could see the realization dawning on his face, but it was too late. He had made his choices, and now he was left with nothing. The restaurant fell into silence as the weight of his betrayal finally sank in. I turned to leave, my heart heavy, but resolved. This was the end of one chapter, but it was also the beginning of a new one without James. I had taken back control of my life,